What's going on, everybody? Welcome back into Grind City Media's mock draft. We are choosing number 9. Oh my gosh, time is flying. Helping me with the San Antonio Spurs pick today is Noah Magaro-George. Welcome. Are you ready?
Yeah, I'm so excited to get this done. I'm excited for the real draft, but mostly excited to be here with you.
Oh, you should be more excited for the real draft for sure. I'm kidding. Okay. Let's talk about the Spurs. They've made it a point over the last few years to continue getting tall, athletic wings. You look at Devin Vassell, Josh Primo. I could go on. Like all these guys just have like the same type of like build / game, really. I'm looking at the Spurs last year and I'm like, they didn't make the playoffs once again, but they made the play-in. They didn't make the playoffs once again. They're top 5 in assists. They're the top team in the league in assist to turnover ratio. What's missing? Like the offense seems to be going well. Well, what do they need?
Yeah, I think this team is pretty limited on both ends of the court. I think people sometimes look at assists and turnovers and they equate that to just offense, and that's perfectly fine. It makes sense. Those are the numbers that are available to us. But I think if you break it down, they don't really have many guys outside of DeJounte Murray who can create advantages, if you know what I mean. They don't have guys who have the gravity to suck in extra defenders, to kick it out to other teammates. So you look at this roster and it's a bunch of guys who are unselfish. Some of them can shoot the 3 ball. Some of them are good cutters, and they're all mostly okay at everything, kind of jack of all trades, master of none. So if I'm the Spurs, I think you're, again, kind of looking at best player available in this draft, regardless of position. And I know Spurs fans probably aren't happy to hear that from me, but I think that's the philosophy that they've lived by. And I think that's one that they need to keep doing until they find someone who can take them to the next level.
Okay. Now, I don't think a number 9 pick in his rookie season is like a guy that can play right away and that will take you to the next level. So let's look at some of the names that are still available on this mock draft that, one, are probably the best available talent, like you just said, but also could fit a mold. The person, when as soon as you were like, no one's a great shooter, the first name that came to mind was AJ Griffin. Not only is he that lengthy wing once again, but he shot 45% from the 3 in college. I'm not going to ask you for your pick, but is there something attractive about him in terms of how he could fit into the Spurs roster?
I think so. If you're the Spurs, you've been living with this Keldon Johnson and Doug McDermott 3 and 4 sort of combination. And I don't think that's ideal. Now, I don't know if it's ideal with Griffin, but again, as we mentioned, they don't really have a lot of shooters. Doug McDermott is 30. He's going to be 31 next season, going to be making almost $15 million. If you can somehow move off of him, not that I know that the Spurs are looking to do that, but AJ Griffin gives you an eventual replacement. Maybe he fits in a little bit better. Looked really good off the dribble in small spurts, obviously starring behind Paolo and behind other guys on that Duke roster. So maybe there's some untapped upside there, but I think he makes sense for the Spurs in some ways for sure.
Terry Eason. Now, obviously not a 3-point shooter, but he has a long wingspan, which is, he's been a pretty good defender. Like he makes an impact on the defensive end, averaging almost 17 points per game in college. Do you like that fit better?
In some ways I do, because he is a forward. They have a lot of holes on the defensive end. As I talked about, that Keldon and Doug McDermott combination doesn't make a lot of sense. Keldon is undersized. Doug is undersized. Doug was one of the worst perimeter defenders in the NBA last year. He wasn't much better in the post. He wasn't that great as a team defender either, man-to-man defender. So Tari isn't an immediate upgrade in terms of he's athletic, he's younger, he's got a bigger wingspan. There's maybe untapped upside as a defender, as a self-creator, but there are things that concern you. You know, there are rumors going around right now from reputable draft people that he isn't really interviewing that well with teams. Mm-hmm. And so his name has started to slide a little bit. So if I'm the Spurs, I don't know if he will be there later at 20 or 25, but 9 certainly feels like a little bit of a reach for a guy who, even without the interviews, didn't always show the best feel for the game. Very raw. But as you mentioned, I mean, at the 9th pick, sometimes that's what you're going to get. You're going to get a guy who needs to be molded. So he could be an option as well.
Still a top 10 talent that the Spurs are going to get either way. So if it's a reach for him, let's see who we're going to go with. It can obviously be anyone we talked about. It can be a brand new person. Noah, you are on the clock now for the number 9 pick. Who are we going with?
You know, I think I'm going to have to go with Jalen Duren out of Memphis. I know that maybe he doesn't make sense because they already have a guy like Jakob Poeltl. But I think when you're looking at long-term upside, which is what the Spurs should be looking at, because they're not ready to compete for anything anytime soon, you should be taking a guy who you think has the potential to be a franchise changer to a degree. Now, is he going to be a superstar? Probably not, but you need those kind of guys who can be your second, third best player to fill out this roster because they have a lot of role players. They don't really need another role player.
Do you see him moving into the starting lineup right away? Or is he a guy like we see this with a lot with bigs entering the league? Like they take a couple of years to really come into their own. We've seen that with Jaren Jackson Jr., who's a franchise player now. He didn't start as that guy for Memphis, for example. Do you see him coming in making an immediate impact?
I don't really. When I look at Jalen Duren, just the film that you have on him, he's more of a guy who's an athletic freak at this point, who has good instincts on both ends. He's a good roller. He's got a good short roll passing ability. He understands his gravity to make plays for others. On the defensive end, sort of the same story, more of a shot blocker than a rim protector. He's sort of flying around the court because he doesn't exactly know where to be, but he knows that he could get there. So I like him as a guy who can maybe learn a little bit under Jakob Poeltl. Maybe he doesn't start right away because, again, he is the second youngest guy in this draft class, reclassified as a junior to a senior so that he could play at Memphis. So you're looking at a guy who's still 18 years old, will still be 18 a month into the NBA season. So for the Spurs, I think Jalen Duren makes sense. Not to throw this little caveat in here, but I do think with young guys being able to work with guys like Tim Duncan, David Robinson, I think it would really behoove the Spurs to get those two guys in contact with Jalen Duren if they were to do that, because we've seen the younger players on this team have access to those guys. And I love Drew Eubanks. I absolutely loved Chimezie Metu when they were here, but they're not the same level of talent as Jalen Duren. And I think mentorship in that way could go a long way. So love the Jalen Duren fit for the Spurs, even if he doesn't play right away for the Spurs as a starter.
I mean, even having an 18-year-old under Pop for that long, it's a lot of time for him to be able to mold him into the player that he could be. And Pop is obviously one of the best coaches in the league, and having extra time as an 18-year-old to get some learning under Pop might be a great thing. Noah, thank you so much for coming on. I like the pick, and I'm excited for actual draft night. I think it's going to be exciting.
Me too. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate you.
Not a problem. And everyone watching at home, make sure you are back here tomorrow. We're finally approaching double digits and we'll have your number 10 pick.